Hey, this is Bruce back at Klepp's Garage, and today we're in Richmond, Indiana. Beautiful day in June of 2023. We're at the Model T Museum, and we're going to learn about the alphabet today. So we're going to go A, B, C, F, K, R, and S, and end up with T. Yeah, I know that's not the way you do the alphabet, but that's the way Ford did the alphabet. Let's learn about the alphabet cars today. These are the early Ford cars from the very beginning. Started out with Model A, ended up with Model T. Then he went back to the Model A again.
Backers weren't interested in auto racing. And his backers brought in a guy named Henry Leland to sort of evaluate Henry's car, which Henry didn't appreciate. And depending on who you believe, either Henry Ford got mad and quit, or his financial backers said, we think this arrangement's gone as far as it can go, you can leave. In any event, Henry left. The financial backers were left with the car. And they couldn't call it, they didn't want to call it the Detroit automobile car anymore. They brought in Henry Leland. Leland said, I've got a one-cylinder engine that I think will work in this car. I like the design of the car, but I think my engine is better. And so they needed a new name for the company. Henry Leland had cast his car, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. They decided to name the car after the French explorer who had founded the city of Detroit, whose name was Cadillac. So the very first Cadillac ends up looking a lot like the Ford. Actually, I did get ahead of myself. Henry Ford left the Detroit Automobile Company, and he founded another company called the Henry Ford Company. And then he left that. And that was a company that was turned into Cadillac. And then when he founded Ford Motor Company, the first product of Ford Motor Company was the 1903 Model A, and it still looked like the car that he had designed for the Henry Ford Company.
Now, do I understand Wilson Company built the bodies for both of the cars?
I think Wilson built the bodies. They did for Ford, and I think they did for Cadillac as well. The important thing to remember is at this point, you can become a car maker without being a car manufacturer. You could design the vehicle and contract for everything. Wheels, tires, engines, transmissions, chassis, bodies, all of it. Just buy that stuff and put it together. And that's what Ford was doing.
And that's how they got around the Selden patent. There were assemblers of cars, but not manufacturers. Is that correct?
Well, they didn't actually get around the Selden patent. They got sued by the people who held the Selden patent. And after a long, drawn-out court case, which they lost, which Ford lost and appealed, they finally won against the Selden patent. Actually, the Selden patent people were trying to claim that Ford was merely an assembler. Yeah.
As I recall, the Selden car, Henry Ford actually built the car according to the Selden drawings, and that car they took to court to prove that it was not operational. It's actually in the archives in the back room of the Henry Ford Museum now. That's okay, that is correct. So anyway, they continued on. They built the Model A at the Mack Avenue plant, which was a rented building. And as soon as he got up and running, they in turn had the McCatt Avenue plant built, moved all the operations to McCatt. They continued with Mack Avenue until they outgrew that facility.
Yeah, they were really only at Mack Avenue for a year. Mack Avenue was actually a one-story frame building that they rented. They added a second story to it because they were quickly outgrowing it, and then they knew they needed a bigger plant, so they built the plant at the corner of Baguette and Ovian Streets in Detroit.
60 Model Bs. This was Ford's second car, soon followed by the Model C. But it was a 1905 model, and they built 500 of them. Bob?
At this point, Henry Ford didn't really know where the automotive market was. Nobody did. And they were experimenting. And this, for Ford Motor Company, was an experiment. The Model A was a two-cylinder, flat two-cylinder engine. This is a four-cylinder. And this is a much more upscale car. It's actually a more modern car. The engine is mounted up front as opposed to under the seat. It's also a car where you can begin to see Henry Ford working out some of the features that are going to appear on the Model A. On the Model T. That rear suspension with the radius rods and the torque tube, that's going to show up ultimately on the Model T. Of course, not with the semi-elliptic springs, but he was figuring out what worked, what didn't work for him, and if he thought it worked, he'd try it and keep it. And that rear axle configuration is one of the things he kept.
Thank you, Bob. So this is the thing to take away. This is Ford's first front-motored, four-cylinder car, and like Bob said, it utilizes some features like the differential that'll be seen on 15 million Model Ts eventually. Bob, let's move over to the Model C. Bruce, I'll give this back to you. And John,
At the Model C, as you will note, the Model A went from an 8 horsepower motor to a 10 horsepower motor with a C. But you'll see the front end is different, where they started to put tanks up forward, but the engine was still underneath the seat. Is this correct? And then that was followed by the Model C to the Model F. That was a 12 horsepower. Anything you want to add?
Only that by this time, modern cars, and the most modern cars were coming from Europe, they'd already figured out that putting the engine up front was going to be the way of the future. It could be bigger, the car could be lower, and that's what happened with the Ford Model B. But the Model C was basically still the Model A with a more powerful engine, but Ford wanted it to look modern, so they put that false hood out front. There's a water tank under there. And Ford was not the only one that did that. Other automobile makers did it as well. Rambler did it, others. Basically taking a somewhat behind the times design and making it look more modern.
Enjoyed it when Wayne passed. Wayne was flattered that his family said they wanted me to be the next caretaker. So here it is. It's a little nicked up, a little greasy and oily because we drive it a lot. We get a lot of miles on it every year, and we have balls. It's the last of the two-cylinder Fords. It has a 12 horsepower engine. In the front it has a gas and a motor tank. The engine's under the seat, still cranking from the side. And it's just a good, faithful car.
Okay, well, thank you, Paul. And now we're going to step up in front of the Model K. The Model K, we can say, is probably one of the most misunderstood of the early Fords. the first six-cylinder engine, and it is quite a build to drive. You want to say anything about it, Bob? No, we'll just turn it right over to Rob.
Thanks, Bruce and Bob. For the next 2 hours, we're going to have an in-depth conversation. That's not what we're a little bit short. Okay, we'll cut it down. Okay, they made 1000 Model K. It began in 1906. And if you read any history of Ford Motor Company, they will tell you that A, Henry Ford needed a six-cylinder. B, that this car did not sell well. C, that it did not run well. And my letters, D, that it didn't make the company money. Well, all of those are untrue.
As Henry Ford sort of worked his way through the alphabet, he was also working his way through his ideas about what kind of car he wanted to build and sell. And he came to the conclusion that really the way to make money was to make a lot of relatively inexpensive cars. And the Model N was the car that he initially saw as sort of the solution to this. And it was remarkable. It was a 4-cylinder car, had it was an all-steel frame. It was a really good value. As Rob has indicated, maybe at the beginning it was too good a value because they weren't actually making much money on it. He had to raise the price so he could actually make a profit on it. But the Model N went on to become the best-selling car in the country. And it was only as they sort of went along with the design of it that Ford realized that he was closing in on the car that he really wanted to build, but he wasn't quite there yet.
Okay, we do have a Model N right behind me. It is actually owned by the early Ford registry. We all donated money and parts to make it happen, so the club owns the car. Some of the things that they had was the planetary gear transmission, but it was all exposed to the road. So the N, then the R, then the S Roadster that we have here were 1906 through 1908. As soon as the Model N was designed and they were starting production, then we decided that it's not quite what you wanted. So in 1907 is when they, roughly, we don't know the exact date, is when they started to design the Model T. And this was, once they had this up and going, the Model T had its start. The Model N, you'll notice it has clamshell fenders, no running boards. The Model R has running boards. Then the Model S had the S Roadster had the mother-in-law seat and very short running board, long fenders. You can tell the N had more of a pointed bobtail. The R was a larger one. They went from the N with the 28-inch wheels to increasing to 30-inch wheels, and they had to make the bobtail larger to put the spare tire in. So there was the open transmission was a problem. Pulling the cylinders off to service the engine was a problem. So they started to come up with the idea of removable cylinders. So the original model engine that a removable cylinder had was a Model N engine, and it is sitting at the Paquette Avenue plant. Is that correct, Bob? Okay. And so the Model N was kind of the test bed for the Model T. And so you can see the progression of the 3 different models, all being very similar. Same engine, transmission, rear end, but the body styles were slightly different, and then the wheel size increased. When it came to the final production of Model R and S, the only part that was the same was the front spring. from there, the rest of the car was completely changed. You'll also note that the water pump is on the front of the radiator, which was a problem. The starting crane through the radiator, which when it kicks back, it could knock out the block and ruin your radiator. So there were some of the other issues. Do you have anything you want to add?
Only that if you look at these, the NRS, you can again see the sort of gradual move towards Model T. The front suspension on these cars is basically Model T. The rear suspension is basically Model B. And because they're still using the full elliptic springs. If you look under the hood, you'll see that the engines on these cars are mounted in 4 places. That could be a problem because as the chassis flexed, you could break the front cross member. That led to the famous 3-point mounting on the Model T engines. You'll also note that the steering wheel is still on the right side of the car, and it would not be moved to the left side of the car until the Model T.
And there's a lot of stories about that. This is Ford not wanting to get out of the car into the middle of the traffic and where the horses were, because we all know what comes out of the south end of a horse. So we wanted to put the passenger and entrance on the side of the street so you wouldn't have to get out into the traffic. Also, when you're driving past each other down the street, this traffic got more intense, that drivers could judge the distance. Instead of the side of the road, they wanted to not hit the other oncoming car. Is that correct, Bob? Okay, he nods yes.
All right, so I'm here with Rob Hyan. He's from the Nebraska area, and he has a quite unique Model T. We'll let him tell you about it, Rob.
Okay, well, this is our Ford Special Racer, and our research shows that Ford between 1910 and 1912 made at least six of these special racing motors. And the way they began was, we have the reminiscences from Joe Galam, who was crucial in the design of the Model T. He reports in his reminiscence that one day Henry Ford came into his office and said, "Joe, I want you to make a racer that will beat the Blitzen Benz." And the Blitzen Benz was the fastest car in the world. A Benz with a huge
Blitzen
motor.
Benz is on YouTube. It's just unbelievably big.
Just held the world speed record from 1909 to 1919, which is phenomenal. Anyway, Henry Ford is telling his chief designer, "I want you to build a car, a racer, that will beat the fastest car in the world, and I want it to look like a Model T." And Joe Galam said to him, "I don't know, Mr. Ford, that's a mighty fast racer." Well, anyway, that began the Special Racer program. Ford built 6 of these. This was their second largest. It's a 300 cubic inch motor, and Ford raced this particular car. And here we can look at the motor. So 300 cubic inch, and to help hide it, we actually have the 4-cylinder back here where a coil box would be on a standard Model T. But other differences include that there was a dual spark Bosch distributor or magneto on here. Now we put a distributor to make it easier to crank start, but so it didn't have the traditional Model T magnets, but it has a big 65-pound flat flywheel inside. Like I said, 300 cubic inch, and this thing is flat out fast.
So the standard Model T was 100 and some cubic
177 cubic inch.
about 180. So this is like twice the size, but it looks similar, so he was a little devious.
Well, and you know, actually all the auto builders did this. Buick did it, everybody did. They want it to look like a stock model, but then of course they wanted it to be the fastest one in its class. So this one raced in the 230 to 300 cubic inch class. This particular racer raced at New Orleans in February of 1911, won several races, raced again in Detroit, And that the Detroit races in the summer of 1911 is when the next bigger or largest racer, a 410 cubic inch Ford, actually beat the Blitz-and-Benz. So Ford got his wish. He beat the fastest car in the world in September 1911 and never raced on the track again.
That was done for Ford
That was
racing.
it. Henry Ford and Frank Kulik, his ace driver, never raced a track race again after they beat the fastest in the world.
No sense in doing any better. Can't get any better than that. Yeah. Fascinating story. Any history about where this come from, how you got it?
This a fellow named Budeman had this in Michigan for years. Researched the deaccession sales from the Henry Ford. It did not come from there, but I have found that 2 special racers were sold in the teens, one to a dealer in New York and one to somebody in Ohio that raced it. Don't know which racers they were, but my guess is this is one of those 2 that got away from Ford Motor Company. Now the biggest one, the 410 cubic inch racer that beat the Blitz-and-Benz, is still at the Henry Ford, but unfortunately it's off display.
Downtown Richmond, Indiana. We're glad to have you all here. And people have come from all over the United States to be here. They love their Model Ts, they love their club, their local chapters, everybody likes to ride around in their Model T and go get ice cream, but it's a bigger community with cars. Ready for more seminars and presentations.
So first we're going to strap down the hood because, 100 mile an hour, that hood's going flying.
don't want to be wearing the hood.
Don't want to wear the hood. I've had one come up at me at 40 mile an hour.
I did my 13 and I had the window half down, so I reached up and I just pushed it back down because it started to lift up and stop.
So much for aerodynamics. 300 cubic inch, conservative. Hand crank.
We're going to prime it.
think, Nash?
That is
Fast.
invigorating.
What was that?
Think.
What was that again? I can't hear you.
That is a hang on to your ass ride.
I think we were going faster idling and high than a stock T flat out.
How fast does it go? What's it? Oh, we've gone over 70. Wow. I think it will go 100. No, I don't think so. I need I could use a higher ratio rear end.
So we're here at the event. If you need parts to build a car, I think you can find them here. I think there's a whole car there. Lots of brass, shiny things. Ooh, pretty. Need some transmission parts. This is the guy to see, Dave. Say hi, Dave. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, Nate. I guess that's who that is.
There's the man to see if you need a go-fast aluminum head. All right, so I'm back here with Dave Nolte, and Dave's got an excellent broke-down model of the T transmission, and he's got it all color coordinated. So he's just going to give us a brief synopsis of how first, reverse, high gear, and brake work. So go ahead and do your thing.
The flywheel is attached to the crankshaft, and when the entire assembly is spinning like this, we're in high gear. The red drum shows you what your rear wheels are doing. So if you put the brake on, the rear wheels stop. If you stop the green drum, which is low gear, you notice that it's now traveling slower, not this.
Oh, yeah, this.
Traveling slower than the flywheel. And then if you hold the blue one, there's reverse. We get reverse out of it. And the gear change is done, of course, high gear, you're running at drive or crankshaft speed.
Yeah.
The
so this is all locked in as one.
Because it's all locked in as one
locked
unit.
in. So none of these gears are turning. None of these are stopped.
But when you do stop these, the reverse gear has a larger gear than the gear on the triple, and that reverses your direction.
So the blue is this inner gear, right?
Yep.
That's the reverse gear. The green is the low band.
Low speed.
And then the brake, well, there is a brake on the red though.
Actually, they call this the driven gear because it's what's driving
the high gear.
Driving everything.
It
drives your brake drum.
So it was very simple. This all ran in oil, motor oil, that actually helped keep it cool. Originally there was cotton bands around this, which nowadays we use Kevlar because you don't have to adjust them. They're like bulletproof. Get that? Kevlar, bulletproof? Anyhow. So it's a very simple design. It's what put the world on wheels. It's the closest thing to an automatic transmission because you're just holding the bands in. On an automatic transmission, the fluid pressure is holding those bands in. Same difference. So I don't know, anything else you want to add?
That's it. Drive your Model T.
Drive your Model T. It's a simple thing, and if you break any of these, this is the guy to see because he makes them all brand new CNC, which they didn't have back in the day. But boy, let me tell you, these are perfect. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Have a good day.
I will. There's a guy from Birdhaven. Hey, Birdhaven.
When the boss comes here, I really would rather not break the camera.
Okay, too late, you're already on. So we're here with Birdhaven. They're out of Iowa. They have everything you need for a T. Model A stuff?
Oh, yes.
Model A also, and even Thunderbird too, right?
Some Thunderbird.
Some Thunderbird stuff in the
49
50s.
59.
49 and 59, okay. And he's got the beloved Scat Crank. Price here today only, $17.50. That's a good deal. I'd buy 2 of them, but you know how it is.
I already have 2, right?
I already got 2, yeah. Can't have enough cranks. Say hi, Tim.
Hi.
We'll say hi to the famous Lucius family. How many kids you got with you?
3.
What happened to the rest of 25 of them? So they do a really yeoman's job on rebuilding
Mag coils.
mag coils, yes. Which one does it? Okay, we're both pointing in both directions. Now, which way is it?
Both of us.
All right. So
He's retired. So.
yeah, I know how that works. He's got stuff for sale. You don't mind being on YouTube, do you?
No, that's fine.
Because you're on.
What city do you live in, Rob?
I live in Milford, Nebraska.
Milford, Nebraska. Now, Rob came here all the way to be a part of our event. He takes home a beautiful award, and we're so proud that he also brought some of his other cars to us. So we're having a great time today. So
Can I have the microphone?
yeah, he's coming. No, we'll have him later. He's going to do some presentations.
Great event. We will be back every year if I can afford it. Just keep the gift certificates coming.
We want you back, so no doubt about it. Congratulations. And hey, thank everybody for voting. We're here to have fun, and there's no doubt about it. Rob's going to arrange to leave his Speedster with me so we can enjoy it all year, and it'll be here, so he'll have a reason to come back next year.
All right, well, there you go. That's going to do it for me today. And showed all the nice cars. You got to see them. So remember, drive them if you got them. They even gave an award away today for the one that drove the most last year.